There comes a time in every journey when silence is no longer strength, but a cage. Today that silence breaks, not with the noise of anger, not with the echo of promises, but with a vision that dares to be bigger than fear, bolder than doubt, and brighter than the shadows we've been walking through. The year ahead is not just another year, it is a turning point. It is a chance to reimagine what leadership truly means, to recognize that power is not measured by titles or thrones, but by the courage to serve, to uplift, and to heal. The 2025 agenda is not a checklist, it is a calling. It calls us to rebuild trust where it has been broken, to place truth above convenience, to remind ourselves that greatness is not about dominating others, but about empowering those who have been unseen, unheard, and underestimated. The future we seek will not come from repeating the past. It will come from rewriting it with compassion. It will come from daring to sit with those who disagree with us, not to silence them, but to understand them. Because true strength is not in shouting the loudest, but in listening deeply. This agenda is not about what one person can achieve. It is about what we together are destined to create. A society where opportunity is not a privilege for the few, but a right for all. A nation where resilience is not just a story we tell, but a reality we live. A tomorrow where our children inherit not our fears, but our faith in the limitless potential of humanity. Yes, there will be obstacles. There will be resistance, but let us remember, walls are not built to confine us. They are built so we can discover the strength to climb higher. The cracks in the system are not signs of collapse. They are invitations for light to enter. So let us break silence not with bitterness, but with hope. Let us speak not of what divides us, but of what unites us. Let us walk into 2025 with the certainty that our scars are not signs of weakness, but symbols of survival. And when the world looks back at this moment, may they not see the breaking of silence, but the beginning of a movement, one where courage redefined leadership and where hope rewrote history. Silence has always been seen as a form of strength, a shield that protects us from conflict, from judgment, from the weight of expectations, but there comes a point when silence no longer protects us. It imprisons us. It builds invisible walls around our voices, and those walls slowly suffocate the truth we are meant to carry. Breaking that silence is not an act of rebellion, it is an act of liberation. It is the moment when we choose authenticity over fear, when we decide that our voices are not a burden but a responsibility. The truth, when spoken, does not always make us comfortable, but it always sets us free. It is easy to stay silent because silence requires no courage, no confrontation, no accountability. But silence also leaves us powerless. It allows lies to echo louder, injustice to stand taller, and fear to spread wider. When we break silence, we invite light into the spaces that have been dark for too long. We create room for healing, for dialogue, for growth. We learn that words, when spoken with sincerity, can build bridges stronger than any wall. Breaking silence is not just about speaking, it is about choosing honesty even when it shakes the ground beneath us. It is about understanding that our voices carry stories, and those stories have the power to awaken hearts, to challenge minds, and to inspire change. Silence might feel safe, but it is never the birthplace of progress. The world has never been moved by what was left unsaid. It has always been moved by the courage of those who dared to raise their voices when it was easier to remain quiet. To break silence is to choose growth over stagnation, courage over comfort, truth over fear. It is to acknowledge that change never begins with the crowd. It begins with one voice, trembling perhaps, but brave enough to rise. True leadership has never been about the weight of titles or the shine of authority. It has always been about the ability to serve. To hold power over people is to control, but to hold power for people is to empower. The difference is subtle, yet profound. One creates fear, the other creates trust. One seeks obedience, the other inspires loyalty. Leadership is not a crown to be worn, it is a responsibility to be carried, and that responsibility demands humility, compassion, and vision. When leadership is reduced to dominance, it divides communities and silences voices. But when leadership becomes service, it elevates others, it recognizes the unseen, it gives dignity to the overlooked. A leader's true strength lies not in how many people follow, but in how many people rise because of them. To lead with empathy means to step into the shoes of the weakest, to feel the weight of their struggles, and to turn those struggles into solutions. It means creating opportunities that do not favor a few, but that open doors for many. Power for people is not measured by grand speeches or promises, but by the quiet changes that transform daily lives, by the courage to put principles above popularity, by the willingness to listen to the smallest voices in the room. When leadership becomes about lifting rather than controlling, it becomes timeless. People may forget policies, they may forget strategies, but they never forget how a leader made them feel. They never forget the moments when someone in power chose kindness instead of arrogance, dialogue instead of dictation, service instead of superiority. True leadership outlives its time because it plants seeds of resilience, seeds of confidence, seeds of unity. Power over people creates followers for a season, but power for people creates leaders for generations, and that is the legacy worth striving for. The cracks we see in our systems often appear to us as signs of weakness, as proof that something has failed. Yet in truth, they are not evidence of collapse, but invitations for light to enter. Every crack is a reminder that perfection is not the measure of strength. Resilience is. A flawless wall may stand tall, but it allows nothing through. A cracked one, however, becomes the passageway for growth, for truth, for transformation. When structures break, when systems falter, when expectations shatter, it is not the end of the story but the beginning of a new one. Cracks force us to pay attention. They make us look closer at what has been ignored, at the foundations we assumed were unshakable. They teach us that no matter how strong something appears, it is still human, still vulnerable, still in need of care. And within those imperfections lies the possibility of renewal. Just as light enters through a broken window to illuminate a dark room, hope enters through the cracks in our lives and our societies to remind us that change is possible. The systems we live in are not destroyed by their cracks. They are reshaped by them. It is in those broken places that reform begins. It is in those weak points that voices rise. It is in those gaps that new ideas find space to grow. To fear the cracks is to fear growth. To embrace them is to welcome evolution. A world without cracks would be rigid, unbending, unyielding, unable to adapt. But a world that accepts its fractures becomes a world that learns, a world that heals, a world that transforms. We must learn to see the beauty in the broken. We must recognize that cracks are not curses. They are the very pathways through which light, hope, and progress find their way to us. Greatness has never been about who can speak the loudest or who can command the room with noise. True greatness is found in the quiet courage to listen. It is easy to raise a voice, to argue, to insist on being heard, but it is far more powerful to open one's heart to the voices of others. Listening is not weakness, it is wisdom. It takes strength to set aside one's own need to dominate and instead give space for another person's truth to exist. In a world that constantly celebrates noise, listening becomes a rare form of leadership, a form of compassion that cannot be faked. When we truly listen, we discover more than words. We hear the fears that are hidden behind silence, the dreams buried beneath hesitation, the pain that often hides beneath anger. Listening is not about waiting for a turn to speak. It is about entering another person's world with humility and empathy. It is about honoring their story as if it were our own. The loudest voices may silence a room for a moment, but the act of deep listening creates connections that last far longer than any speech. Greatness is not a performance, it is a practice. It is the discipline of listening not only to those we agree with, but especially to those who challenge us, those who test our patience. those who reflect back to us what we might not want to see. A true leader is not afraid of opposing voices because listening transforms disagreement into dialogue and dialogue into understanding. The courage to listen deeply allows us to build bridges where walls once stood, to plant seeds of trust where division once grew. In the end, the voices that change us the most are not always the ones spoken with thunder, but the ones heard in stillness. The act of listening reminds us that greatness is not about controlling conversations, but about creating spaces where every voice matters. Scars are often seen as marks of weakness, reminders of battles we should have avoided or wounds we should have hidden. But in reality, scars are the most honest proof that we have lived, endured, and risen. They are not signs of defeat, but symbols of resilience. Every scar tells a story, not of how we fell, but of how we stood again. They remind us that pain did not have the final word, that loss did not take away our will, that brokenness did not steal our ability to rebuild. Scars carry beauty because they reflect survival. They whisper the truth that life is not meant to be perfect, and neither are we. It is in our brokenness that our strength is revealed, because strength is never born from comfort. It is forged in fire. A smooth, unmarked surface speaks of safety, but it is the cracked, scarred one that tells of journeys walked, storms endured, and victories won in silence. To hide scars is to hide courage, and to embrace them is to honor the resilience that shaped us. Every scar is a lesson written on our skin, a reminder that battles come and go, but the will to survive carries us through them. They connect us to others too, because while our stories differ, the presence of scars unites us in shared humanity. They remind us that everyone carries wounds, some visible and some hidden, and that compassion grows when we recognize this truth. To carry scars proudly is to declare that the past may have wounded us, but it could not define us. Scars are not the end of the story, they are the evidence that a new chapter began. They are not signs of weakness, they are living proof that we were tested and we endured. They are the strength etched permanently into our being, whispering with every glance that survival itself is a victory.